thing is on display. It's on public display for 1,200 years.
Mm-hmm.
It is believed by most of the people looking at it that it is magical, that it has powers.
Yeah.
Now, how much power does a human being have? Are we just meat, or are we spirit? Is there mind over matter? Can the mind change matter? Can the mind have an effect on matter? If 1 million people looked at an object and thought it had magic, would that give it magic?
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America Audio, with your host, Tim Binnall.
Hello out there, my friends. This is Tim Binnall of BinnallofAmerica.com with another edition of Binnall of America Audio. It is March 11th, 2006. Our guest this week, Jerry E. Smith, part 2 of 2. We're picking it up where we left off last week with Secrets of the Holy Lance. In part 1 of 2, we discussed the lance, where it came from, the history of the lance, the legend of the lance, and the various holders of the lance leading up to where we start off today with Adolf Hitler. So go back and check part 1 of 2 for the Passion, Charlemagne, Constantine, Queen Boadicea, and all the various factions and folks that have held on to the spear up until it got into the grasp of one Adolf Hitler, which is where we start this week. And where we go this week is with Adolf Hitler. He has the spear, how he got the spear, what he did with it when he got it, Heinrich Himmler and his bizarre obsession with the spear, what happened to the spear post-World War II, the various rumors. Is the spear in Austria the real spear? Did the spear get sent to Antarctica? We talk about Nazi Antarctic bases. We talk about Admiral Byrd and Operation High Jump. We talk about rumors of Nazis escaping to Antarctica and Argentina. And we talk about the rumors of Adolf Hitler and whether or not he faked his own death. From there, we wrap up the discussion on Secrets of the Holy Lance with some existential questions. As you heard the teaser at the beginning, sort of like what powers the spear, and irregardless of whether it was actually at the Passion. We discussed that sort of thing, some existential ponderings on the spear. And in the final half hour, we discussed Jerry's childhood friend, Jim Keith, who's very well known in the esoteric community. He passed away a few years ago. Jerry knew him from high school all the way up to his death, so this is a rare glimpse at the life and times of Jim Keith that is really priceless for anybody who's a student of esoterica and the various folks who've made serious contributions to the field. Here's a little bit about Jerry E. Smith for those of you who are unfamiliar with him. Check out part 1 of 2 for his in-depth bio that he gave us, and he discusses where he came from and all that great stuff. So if you want to learn more about Jerry E. Smith, obviously check out part 1 of 2 for his bio that came straight from him. But here's a little bit about him. Jerry E. Smith has been a writer, editor, and activist for over 3 decades. In 1991, he and Jim Keith founded the National UFO Museum, NUFOM, in Reno, Nevada. From 1991 to 1994, Jerry was the executive director of NUFOM, while Jim Keith acted as the chairman of the board. In addition to his administrative duties of running the day-to-day operations of NUFOM, Jerry also edited and wrote for that organization's quarterly journal, Notes from the Hangar. At the same time, Jerry worked as an editor and graphic artist for Jim Keith's magazine Dharma Combat, the magazine of spirituality, reality, and other conspiracies. Jerry served variously as managing editor and art director from Dharma Combat's inception in 1998 until Jim's untimely death in 1999. Today, Jerry lives and continues to write in Reno, Nevada. His websites are jerryesmith.com and secretsoftheholylance.com. And let me spell those out for you. It's Jerrye Smith.com and www.secretsoftheholylance.com, or you can just go to spearbook.com, SPEARBOOK.com, for all the information about Secrets of the Holy Lance. Without any further ado, let's rock and roll here. This interview was recorded on February 12th, 2006. Jerry E. Smith, Part 2 of 2, on Binnall of America Audio.
Okay, so Hitler ascends to power in Germany and goes and takes the spear. So he sort of does what Napoleon wanted to do.
Exactly. He was the first non-royal to possess it in 1,200 years.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell the story about how he gets it? Because it's like the actual presentation to him of it, because it sounds like it was quite a big deal at the time.
Yeah, there are a number of conflicting stories as to what happened and when. Some say that he went straight to the spear. Others that it took him a couple days. What we believe happened was that the soldiers rolled into Austria, and while they did that, he sent some SS ahead to make certain that the spear was safe and that nothing wrong happened to it. He then went to his hometown of Lentz, where his mother had died, and went to his mother's grave and spent at least one day and 2 nights in Lentz before going on to Vienna. And there are 2 different stories about how he got the spear. One story says that he went directly to the spear, to the museum, and went into the museum and was alone with the spear for an hour. We don't think that's what happened. We have what we got was that there was a gala banquet held in his honor, a typical state banquet at the royal palace, and during the dinner, a certain Colonel Book arrives with the spear in its velvet case and presents it. And apparently, the story goes that the Colonel Book and his SF's men come in and line up against the wall, and everybody stops and looks at what the hell is going on here. Yeah. And Book clicks his heels. It must have sounded like a rifle shot going off in the banquet hall, and announces here is the Holy Lance. And Hitler gets up, comes to him, and Book takes it out of the box and dubs him like a knight with it. At which point, supposedly Hitler kept it for an hour or so, and then ordered it sent back to the museum. In the next few days, a special train, on an armored train, took the entire Reich treasure back to Nuremberg. Now, what we've been able to piece together is that he kept it for about 8 months. Yeah. And the whole Blitzkrieg period of the war, when he rolled into Poland and rolled into Belgium and rolled into France, that was the period where he had the spear. Yeah. And then he decided and then it's interesting as to what really happened to it at that point. We have to bring in Himmler. Yeah. If anything, Himmler was as freaked out about the spear as Hitler, if not more so. Before the war, in 1935, Himmler had a replica of the spear made. He had found a castle called Wievelsburg, and he had redone the castle as a homage to the spear. Every room in the castle was appointed with stuff from the time of various, each room was dedicated to a particular possessor of the spear and was decorated with stuff that guy had. So the Henry the Fowler room has got Henry the Fowler stuff in it. The Charlemagne room has got Charlemagne stuff in it.
So it's like a veritable Holy Lance museum.
Exactly. And Himmler was a neo-pagan, straight ahead pagan. He was trying to bring back Sparta. He really wanted to bring back Sparta.
Yeah.
And you may recall Sparta was a communist military dictatorship of homosexuals.
Huh.
Little odd place. And Himmler was absolute believer in Aryan folktales. In total believer in the whole Aryan race and the Teutonic Knights and the Holy Grail and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he created a circle of Holy Grail Spear of Destiny Knights called the Knights Grand Circle, and conducted weird black magic using his replica of the spear until the Anschluss.
Yeah.
When apparently he brought the greatest swordsmaker from Japan to Binnall and had them make an exact duplicate of the spear. And it's the duplicate that went on display in Nuremberg. And the real one stayed at his crazy castle to do bizarre black magic.
Now, did Hitler, obviously Hitler was probably out of the loop on this switcheroo, correct?
Who knows?
You don't
know. Hitler seems to have surrendered the spear to back. He stopped using it.
Yeah. Now, do you think that ties into how Hitler sort of, it seems at some point in his reign of terror, Hitler sort of turned his back on his occult leanings? Do you think did it occur around that time, you think?
It's hard to say. What we know about the occult in the Third Reich is not from original sources. We know basically it's all hearsay, and it's hearsay compounded on hearsay on hearsay on hearsay.
Yeah.
Very little of those who were in the occult bureau of the SS survived, and very little of what they said survived. So there's an awful lot of very good research done on this. But what we can see is not what happened during the war, but what led up to the war.
Yeah.
And we can see there was in the inner circle of the Nazi Party, about half were intense neo-pagan occult freaks, and the other half were militarists and futurists.
Yeah. So they didn't have like same shared interests type of thing.
No, it must have been a very strange place. To have been in the inner circle must have been really, truly, awesomely weird.
Yeah, and Hitler, so he has the spear for 8 months, and that's when he's going through Europe. He's cutting through like a swath, and then
exactly. And again, you use the spear in battle, you are invincible. And then he passes the spear to his pagan pope, who does weird stuff with it. Now, maybe the real spear really did go to Nuremberg and end up being recovered and going back to Vienna, or maybe it didn't. Dr. Feather's work unearthed a spear that is a Carolingian spear. It's not a Roman spear. The folks who put forward the story that the spear did not go to Vienna say that the swordsmaker was instructed to use Carolingian technology, to use Carolingian materials intentionally, so that if they ever attempted to do testing of it, they would say that it was Charlemagne's hoax.
Yeah.
Now this is very interesting because this was said almost 20 years before the actual scientific testing was done. So it wasn't like they did the testing and they said, oh, well, see, that's because. This was, when they do the testing, they're going to find, and that's what they found.
Exactly.
I thought that was an interesting reversal of how it usually goes.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, it had been rumored for a long time that might have been possible, and then in some ways the testing almost could have confirmed that idea or gave credence to that rumor.
Right, and of course this basically comes from a story which is probably a hoax. There was an American college professor who taught medicine, and he was a medical doctor. And during World War II, he had been a medic and was one of the first people into Dachau prison. And there was a rather bit of nastiness at Dachau prison that most Americans are unaware of, called the Dachau Massacre. When the Americans liberated the Dachau prison, the first thing they did is they rounded up all the Germans, surrendered to them, and they put them in a spot. And then they went and looked around in the prison and discovered the horrible conditions there, and the U.S. soldiers freaked out. They went and shot every one of the Germans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this did not sit well with Dr. Buchner. And many years later, Buchner wrote a book about the Dachau massacre from an eyewitness standpoint. Shortly after his book was published, a person comes to him and says that he was a submariner with the German submarine fleet during World War II, and that he was part of the Führer convoy, the last three ships the last three or more submarines that took escaping Nazis, including Martin Bormann, from Germany as it was surrendering, and they had on board the Holy Lance, and they took the Holy Lance to Antarctica. And further, this sailor claims that he has proof that in 1979 the Holy Lance was rescued from Antarctica.
Exactly, which is where your book picks up, and at the beginning and ends it. And that is really one of the most fascinating parts of the book, because I have a long time interest in this, what is called Station 211, which would be the the purported Nazi base at Antarctica.
Righto. So this sailor has the log of the Hartmann expedition and a signed, handwritten letter of authenticity from Colonel Hartmann stating that this is true, and some photographs of some of the things that they found that they brought back from Antarctica. Now, the story goes that in 1945, as the Reich is falling apart, Hitler personally pulls aside Colonel Hartmann and tells him, I got some stuff I don't want anybody to get. You are in charge of making it go away and stay away. And Hitler gives things to Hartmann, which includes things like his scout badges, personal memorabilia things, his favorite little painting, and his favorite belt buckle, some odds and ends, crazy things.
Yeah.
And by the time Hartmann has acquired all this stuff and made it to the port of Kiel, Hitler is supposedly already dead in the bunker, and included with the stuff is the ashes of Eva and Hitler. And Colonel Buchmann's books, Colonel Buchmann wrote two books about this: Hitler's Ashes, Seeds of a Fourth Reich, and Adolf Hitler and the Secrets of the Holy Lance. These books are based on this guy. This sailor has come to him with the with the Hartmann expedition, and says not only did Hartmann arrange to have these 8 bronze boxes of stuff put on a sub, and the sub go to Antarctica and stash it, but in 1978, Rudolf Hess, who was in charge of building Station 211, and he stashed it in 211. Hess, who's the last prisoner in Spandau prison, is taken out of the prison for a couple of days for I think it was an ulcer. He's taken to a hospital, and while he's in the hospital, he manages to get a message out, and the message tells Hartmann that he has to he has to close the circle. He has to reconvene the circle of the Knights Grand Circle that Himmler had started. He has to bring back into existence the order of the Holy Knights, the Knights of the Holy Lance, and you can't do that unless you have the Holy Lance. Yeah. So he has to go down to Antarctica and get it.
Oh man.
So in 1979, he's now, an aging businessman, and all the other knights are aging businessmen. And he pulls together an expedition and goes down to Antarctica in 1979, goes to where they stashed it, and it's beyond them to get all 8 boxes. They can only get 4 boxes. They bring 4 boxes back. And this sailor says that he was part of the Hartmann expedition. He took the Lance to Antarctica in 45, and he helped to recover it in 79. And because Buchner has written this book about the Dachau massacre, it shows that he's a good man, and that he can be trusted by the German people with this knowledge. So he then gives him, the log to the Hartmann expedition and these photographs and yada yada, which he and Buchner write the first book, Hitler's Ashes, but the sailor dies while they're writing the book. Buchner did quite a bit of research to try and establish whether or not this was a total hoax or the truth, and he contacted most of the people who claimed to be part of the Hartmann expedition. He contacted a number of people who were part of the Führer convoy that was at least 3 subs, and there was a lot of cooperating evidence. I mean, the 2 of the 3 subs surrendered months after the war's end. The war ended in June. Nazi Germany surrendered in June, and one of the subs surrenders in July, and another one in August. Both at Mar del Plata, the closest Argentine naval base to Antarctica.
Yeah.
And their stories. The stories of the captains of where they've been and why it took them a couple of months to get around to surrendering don't make any sense. They don't hold water. Both the captains are held by the U.S. and the Brits for a year and a half, and eventually the Brits let them go because they figure that they can't get any more out of them. When the ships surrendered, there were some very odd things. One ship, now these are the super submarines. They're the size of aircraft carriers.
Oh, wow.
They were not made as war machines. They're underwater cargo ships.
Yeah.
They were made initially to supply the submarine fleet. By building these underwater cargo ships, they could get stuff out of the Baltic Sea where they were being built to the Atlantic Ocean and resupply the U-boats. Mm-hmm. At war's end, they changed their mission, and they became part of the Northern Rat Line, which was how the Nazis escaped. The Southern Rat Line was through the Vatican and Spain, and the Northern Rat Line was through Norway and the subs. And it's pretty clear that Martin Bormann was on one of those ships. Oddly enough, Bormann, one of the ships that surrenders, is packed with cigarettes and brandy. And submariners don't smoke or drink on duty. And it was Martin Bormann's brand of cigarettes and brandy. The other ship had 76,000 pairs of shoelaces.
Oh, wow. That's strange.
Yeah. So Buchner concluded that it was a true story, that there really had been an effort to hide in Antarctica Hitler's special things. Now, what we do in the book Secrets of the Holy Lands is we kind of springboard off of that.
Yeah.
Because there are all these urban legends about Station 211 and New Schwabenland and the Nazi attempt to put a colony in Antarctica. And so we build on the Buchner scenario by giving all that we know about it, which is quite a bit, oddly enough.
Yeah, you guys have a lot of information in the book about that, about the Nazi base at Antarctica. Tell me a little bit about that. How did that come about, do you think, and how extensive do you think it really was, and how do you think it really turned out to be? But that's where a lot of Nazis went after the war, and is it still there, you think, or tell me about that?
Well, what we know is that in 1938 there was a German Antarctic expedition that claimed about a fifth of the continent as a German colony, as German property.
Yeah.
They took something like 11,000 photographs. They dropped hundreds of Nazi flags and rods with a metal top with the logo of the expedition, and claiming a statement that they were claiming it for their country.
Yeah.
So we know that the Nazis did in fact claim a big piece of Antarctica as German territory. There have been literally from day one, literally from 1940 on, stories of an attempt for the Nazis to actually occupy their territory, and most of the stories say that the effort was called Station 211, or code name Station 211, and it's almost impossible to get any hard facts on this, one way or the other. The rumors, particularly the internet rumors, particularly the Russian press, is just wacky stuff. Apparently. You remember during the Cold War days that the great Russian newspaper was Pravda.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. Pravda is Russian for truth. Apparently, Pravda has become like the National Enquirer of Russia these days.
Sure seems it, yeah.
And they have been running wild stories about not only the Germans called it New Schwabenland, where at the same time, literally like 3 days later, or 3 days earlier, the Norwegians had claimed the same property, calling it Groningen or Queen Maud Land. Now, the Soviets, or Pravda is claiming that the capital of New Schwabenland is called New Berlin, and that there are between 2 and 3 million inhabitants there right now. Wow. And not only that, but then it has the city. It stretches for hundreds of miles through tunnels, through the ice in the mountains, and they have many. We have found something like 170 lakes under the ice now. And so there is this claim that these lakes are not just under the ice, they're like resorts. and the New Berlin has an alien quarter where peoples from other worlds hang out.
Yeah, and it sort of ties into the whole, I don't want to say hollow earth, but like underground earth tunnel aspect of the esoteric research, would you say?
Right. That was another aspect of the book, is that Himmler wasn't just crazy for the Holy Lands. He was crazy for all of he really was trying to find the Ark of the Covenant. the Indiana Jones stories are based in fact. I mean, they really were looking for it.
Yeah.
And they were also looking for Atlantis and Shambhala or Shambhala.
Yeah.
They were trying to find the entrance into the Hollow Earth. There probably is no such thing, but it's a piece of human consciousness that keeps popping up. That people keep telling stories about it. And there are so many weird connections to all this. The one is the Admiral Byrd connection. Byrd had been invited to join the 1938 German expedition, and for unknown reasons decided not to. And then in 1946-47, he leads the largest expedition ever mounted to Antarctica. And this was no scientific expedition. It was purely military. It was a U.S. Navy show run by the U.S. Navy, and it was their first Antarctic mission in 100 years since Wilkes had explored the place. And this expedition is 4,700 men, an aircraft carrier, 2 destroyers, a submarine, several dozen aircraft, both fixed wing and rotary. This was a major military expedition.
And this is, that's Operation High Jump, right?
That's Operation High Jump.
Yeah, and that's very well known in some circles in esoterica. I definitely, if you want to know more about Operation High Jump, check out this book, because this book gave a lot of great information, because I've always been looking for more, and you guys just provided a ton of stuff.
Yeah. That was a fun piece of research. I wrote the Antarctica stuff, and I wrote the ancient history stuff. And George wrote the crucifixion and the immediate aftermath of the crucifixion, Joseph of Arimathea and Queen Boadicea, and he wrote all the Nazi stuff. So I spent all my time researching either Roman politics or Station 211.
Nice. And so Operation High Jump, it kind of never really got off the ground once they got to Antarctica, and the rumors are that they actually engaged in battle with Nazis. Obviously, that's not what came out in the press reports and the mainstream historical accounts, but there's always been that tinge to it that perhaps that what really was going on was some kind of battle between Nazis and the U.S. expedition there, which is what Operation High Jump was.
Exactly. High Jump was outfitted with all this stuff, and they had enough provisions to be there for 8 months. Now, the Antarctic summer is a little over 3 months long. The good weather, they could maybe have squeezed 6 months out of it. They were actually there for, I think it was 16 weeks.
Yeah.
And they left abruptly. I mean, one day Byrd just said, "Okay, we're pulling the plug. We're leaving in an hour. Everybody pack your bags." It was like what? And there was never any explanation for it. It was just a sudden, "Okay, we're going now." It's still to this day nobody has a clue why.
Yeah, it's very mysterious. And Byrd has a sort of weird tie-in to Antarctica altogether. Not only what you said about how he was invited to the original Nazi or German expedition to Antarctica, but then later on, was this after High Jump that he had the diary and the purported flight into the middle of Earth and all that crazy stuff?
Okay, it is literally crazy stuff. What it is Byrd had a son, and sometime, I think in the 1960s, Byrd's son started came up with this diary of his father, in which it was claimed that Byrd had flown 600 miles into the Hollow Earth and met the king of the Hollow Earth and had dinner with him, and long conversations and yada yada. Well, Byrd's son was stone crazy and just made this thing up. But it's gotten a lot of circulation. A lot of people think it's real.
But there's no real credence to the Byrd diary.
Have you read it? You can actually get it on the internet. You can actually read the whole darn thing on the internet, and it is it's really bad science fiction.
Yeah, I've read pieces of it.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe that was just to throw this out there, sort of like a theory, maybe that the diary was sort of like a cloaked story, that there was something to investigate at the Antarctica, but it wasn't, but they had to cloak it almost in such bizarre terms.
I wouldn't be surprised. You take the military are very well known for disinformation programs in which they will take a truth and to hide the truth they will add layers of nonsense on top of it, and people will stop looking at the truth. The classic is Paul Benowitz and the Dulcie Base stories.
Yeah.
There was an advanced aircraft program that he was seeing, and they got him to look the other way by feeding him all this Dulcie Base nonsense.
Now, obviously, since '79, that's obviously technology's advanced and expeditions probably have advanced. Has there been any sort of sightings of Station 211 or any more recent, other than the Pravda stuff, anything coming out from the science community or esoteric science community that has any more information on Station 211 that might shed light on it, on a hatch somewhere or a cool picture?
I hate to say this, but no. But I think I figured out why, and that is the probable site seems to be in the Hoffman-Mulig mountain range, and that is an ice-free area. Most people don't realize that 2% of Antarctica is ice-free. There's lots of geothermal in that area. There is life there, and it's quite possible. I mean, people live in Antarctica now. There are full-time residents in Antarctica, mostly at McMurdo Station and at the South Pole Station. But there are people who live there year-round. I'm actually thinking about joining them. I'd like to open a bar in McMurdo. I understand there are 3 bars in McMurdo now. If there are 3, there's probably room for a 4th.
Yeah.
McMurdo now has over 1,000 buildings. It's a big place. The winter population is around 4,000. The summer population is about 15 to 20,000 scientists, and between 20 and 40,000 tourists.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and tourism is booming there. The tourism is so big. The Argentines are building a Las Vegas-style resort on an Antarctic island.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
And how far away is that from where Station 211 will be?
Well, on the opposite side of the continent.
Oh, wow.
The dead opposite side of the continent. The area in the Mulig-Hoffman mountain range that could be where 211 is, this area is now sequestered. It is a protected zone. The Antarctic Conservation Act of 1978, a U.S. government law, has created that area as a specially protected zone because it is a breeding site. It's a nesting grounds for a couple of different kinds of birds, and it's now no humans allowed location.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if Station 211 really is somewhere in Antarctica, this would be the best way to keep the world from finding out about it.
Exactly. Now, did the Hartmann expedition, did they go there before or after it was protected? It was called protected.
They went there after. It was protected in '78, and they went there in '79.
Oh, okay. All right.
And there is a Norwegian base at the protected site called Station Tor, T-O-R.
Yeah.
Tor is it may be just to watch the birds breed, or it may be to map, mine, and figure out what they can find in 211.
Exactly, yeah. Now, can you, like, let's say I was super rich, can I fly over Station 211, or would they be like, would they shoot me onto or shoot me down or something?
I'm not real sure. There is a moratorium on tourist air flights.
Yeah.
A tourist plane in about 5 or 8 years ago crashed into Mount Erebus, which is the only active volcano in Antarctica. It's a few miles from McMurdo, and this tourist plane was trying to land at McMurdo, and it crashed into Mount Erebus, and they banned tourist flights. So I don't know if I don't think there's any civilian flying taking place in Antarctica right now.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I'm not super rich anyway, so that won't be a problem for me.
Yeah, but there was a U.S. Navy event recently that was reported to the world as one thing, and it may have been something else. The U.S. Navy may have been searching for 211 a couple of years back. What it was is during Operation High Jump, there was one admitted air disaster in which one of the flying boats, one of the TBYs, crashed and burned, and half the crew were killed. I think it was like 4 guys were killed, and they never recovered their bodies. So I think it was 2003, the U.S. Navy went looking for the crash site and didn't find it. But did they go looking for the crash site, or were they really looking for 211 and use the crash as an excuse?
Exactly, yeah. And one of the other aspects of the book that you get into pretty heavily, and like you said, you've done your own research into it, was the shadowy circumstances of Hitler's death. We're kind of bringing it back here now to the end of World War II, and how mysterious Hitler's death was. Nowadays, it's sort of accepted as fact that he killed himself in the bunker, but back then it was actually pretty controversial at the time. It was kind of like how Bin Laden is now, where they're like, is he alive or not? At least back then, it was sort of like they claimed he committed suicide, but there was never really any proof about it, and there never really has been. Correct.
Right. You actually hit on one of my favorite pieces in the book, because George first drafted that, and then I went crazy and added a great deal on that. And in the process of researching it, I found the Hitler's home address in Argentina, and went, "Wow, this is so good!"
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So in 2004, an Argentine published a book that is a tour guide to where the Hitlers lived. And he grew up in the town, and so he knows all these. It was a town that had a bunch of Nazis, and most of them came via submarine. They came in the Fuhrer convoy.
Yeah.
And so he grew up with these guys.
Oh.
And so he wrote a book exposing where they lived, and it's got like diagrams and maps and everything, so you can actually go and check out the Hitler's house.
Oh, wow.
Needless to say, we don't believe that he died in the bunker. Then there's the evidence of him dying in the bunker is all hearsay. It's all secondhand. When Berlin fell, the Soviets took it over, and they did not allow the Allies, the British or the Americans, in for 8 weeks. And by the time my 8 weeks were up, the evidence in the bunker was completely muddled. There was no way you could do any sort of forensic study from that. There was a U.S. You may remember during the Gulf Wars, we had a guy who always knew where Saddam Hussein was, right? Because they're trying to shoot him, which a lot of people thought was playing dirty. But we had a whole branch of intelligence tracking where is Saddam this minute. Well, during World War II, we did that also. We had a full bird colonel with a department tracking where is Hitler right now, and he was one of the first people in the bunker. And he said that what the Soviets said was bunk. The evidence that the Soviets presented was one of Hitler's hats and one of Ava's panties. And these things had scorches on them, and supposedly, this is what's left from them burning him.
Yeah.
Later, the Soviets dragged out an autopsy that was clearly false, because the autopsy was of a man with one testicle. Now, the whole bit about Hitler having one testicle was an urban legend.
Yeah.
He was a normal man, at least physically.
Yeah.
And so the Soviet autopsy is clearly nonsense. And so I pulled together a number of really good quotes, including one from the U.S. Secretary of State, who was at a conference with Stalin after the war, and he reported that this is the Secretary of State in his tell-all biography or autobiography. He says that at this dinner party, at one point, Stalin gets up and comes over to him and clinks glasses with him, and he decides to ask, and he asks Stalin, "Do you think Hitler died in the bunker?" And Stalin says, "No, he escaped. He went either to Spain or Argentina."
Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff, and that sort of speaks to the idea that a lot of the top level Nazis probably escaped, and at the time, I guess Germany was just completely decimated, and Japan obviously was destroyed. So it was probably in the best interests of everybody at the time, I guess, to say, to just go with the story, right?
Right. At the time, most of America did not believe that he died in the bunker. The opinion polls taken throughout the 50s were the majority of Americans, like 75 to 85%, thought Hitler had escaped. And there were Hitler sightings, like Elvis sightings, that went on for decades. And some of the Hitler sightings were hilarious, and some of them were, wow, that might actually have been him.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating, and the book is awesome for that stuff too, especially just tons of in-depth material on the potential of a Hitler escape, which has really been fascinating. As time goes by, and a generational thing that just becomes accepted as fact, when more than likely it may not be.
Yeah, that really is the nature of history. Is most of what's accepted as being fact never happened.
Yeah. So the spear ends up in Antarctica and possibly.
Actually, when I started telling you the story, I said I think it's a hoax. I think Colonel Buchner was the victim of an incredibly elaborate hoax. I don't think it's credible that this happened. However, it is now a part of the Spear legend. Our book is Secrets of the Holy Lands, the Spear of Destiny in History and Legend.
Yeah.
What we tried to do is we tried to get every piece of the Spear legend, regardless of how idiotic it is. I mean, we included the stuff about it being made by Tubal-Cain. We don't think it was made by Tubal-Cain. We don't think Tubal-Cain ever existed. But it's a part of the legend. And so what we did is we tried to assemble the entire Spear legend, and then link it to what historical facts we can to flesh out whether or not it is or isn't true. We make it quite clear that from Dr. Feather's work, it's improbable that the spear in Vienna was the spear that was used in the crucifixion. In fact, we make it quite clear that it's improbable that any of the spears were used in the crucifixion. If one of the one that has the greatest likelihood of being it is the one in the Vatican, and the Catholic Church is saying, well, we don't know. Well, if they're not making any claims, it probably isn't it.
Yeah.
You know, if they really did have it, they would be screaming, "We got it!"
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So, do you think that speaks to the idea that maybe it's the idea of the Holy Lance, that it's like if you believe that it's the Holy Lance, it gives you a false sense of unstoppableness. I don't know. I'm at a loss of words.
Right. Invincibility.
Yes.
I believe that Hitler believed that he had the spear of destiny, and that he believed that with it he was invincible. And for a couple of years there he was. The belief in the object is really the object.
Yeah.
You know, and there are one of the things we tackled in the book was these bizarre supernatural stories around it. And one of the questions, one of the areas, I'm not really sure whether I managed to get this into the book or not. Since you just read the book, maybe you can help me out by saying whether you read it in there.
Yeah.
One of the things is I was thinking as I'm writing it is, this thing is on display. It's on public display for 1,200 years.
Mm-hmm.
It is believed by most of the people looking at it that it is magical, that it has powers.
Yeah.
Now, how much power does a human being have? Are we just meat, or are we spirit? Is there mind over matter? Can the mind change matter? Can the mind have an effect on matter? If 1 million people looked at an object and thought it had magic, would that give it magic?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Even if it is a hoax upon a hoax upon a hoax, it still might do what it says it does.
Exactly, yeah. Because, like you said, if it's been on display for 1,200 years, it builds upon itself.
Exactly.
The belief, almost like how money is really paper, but it's worth something to everybody because they believe it's worth something.
Right, the Federal Reserve notes are just dirty pieces of paper.
Exactly.
But everybody wants some.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, the Holy Lance of Hitler ends up in, the Holy Lance of Hitler ends up back in Vienna where it had been before he got it. Do you ever see a situation where the lance, throughout human history, various folks have had the lance or claimed to have the lance and been these powerful leaders, and now we're living in modern times. Do you expect to see a time in the future? Can you envision that someone's going to want that lance, or someone's going to show up claiming to have the other, the real lance, type of situation? Or is it destined to become just a museum relic?
The materialist modernist in me says it's just a museum relic. However, as we began this conversation, we know that at least 85% of Americans believe in angels.
Yeah.
If there are people, we know that 95% of Americans believe in the God of the Bible. This means that somebody can play on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somebody can use that belief, and particularly if they possess that belief. That again, belief is the most powerful thing in human history. Humans have been busy whacking each other since the beginning of history over questions like whether or not God wears trousers.
Exactly, and how long was it in the museum before Hitler got it in the first place? 200 years.
It was in Vienna. Okay, it was spirited out of Nuremberg. At the end of the 1700s, like 1798.
Oh, okay.
The Holy Roman Empire collapsed in 1806, and it was sold to the Habsburgs after that. So it's probably been in the Habsburg Museum, and we didn't get a date on when it was actually installed, but we think it would have been around 1807. plus or minus a year.
Yeah, so like that goes to what I was going to say is that like it was on display there for like 150 years, and I'm sure at the beginning,
and then 400 years in Nuremberg before that.
Yep.
Charlemagne had it. Charlemagne had it on display. Most of the people who have had it on display.
Yeah.
So Charlemagne, in the year 800, has it on display in his castle in Aachen, and puts it on coins and uses it ceremonially. And many of the possessors of it had used it ceremonially. So there would be, rallies with, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that would see this thing in a single moment.
Yeah, and like it was on display for so long, and it kind of speaks to the idea that maybe back in when World War II was before it started and everything, it probably would have never dawned on people, much like it wouldn't dawn on people today, that some crazy nut is going to want to get that Holy Lance because he thinks it's going to help him rule the world. So it's entirely possible that, in 100 years from now, war could break out in Europe again, and some crazy bastard's going to be like, I need that lance. And, they'll be talking about it on the 24-hour news.
Yeah, it's very possible. It's very possible. And then again, it's not impossible that the Buchner scenario has some truth in it. It is quite that we have established that there was the Fuhrer convoy. At least 3 super subs went to Argentina and possibly Antarctica. That it's not impossible. There were very strong ties between Germany and Japan during the war. It's not impossible that a German a Japanese swordsmaker could have fabricated a replica that would have been good enough to have fooled the people in Vienna. It's unbloody likely, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
And if all of that is true, if it really did go to Antarctica and was rescued in 1979, it's a player on the world stage now. It is in a claimant's hands. It is being used by somebody for some purpose at this moment in time. It's not just in a museum or in a church in Armenia.
Exactly, yeah. So that there's also that entire possibility that like as you allude to, as the Fourth Reich, and sort of the groundwork was laid with Project Paperclip and the CIA being formed at NASA, that the whole Nazi element may have gone underground, including the Holy Lance.
Right, and there's an awful lot of evidence about the Nazi underground. It's one of the books I helped Jim Keith with was his very first book. As I said at the beginning, Jim and I were publishing a magazine called Dharma Combat, and we got wonderful stuff for Dharma Combat, and Jim decided that he wanted to go from it being a zine to being a real magazine. In fact, what he wanted to do is he wanted to bring it out in paperback form as a quarterly paperback.
Yeah.
And he got a hold of Adam Parfrey at Farrell House, who just had a huge success with his Apocalypse Culture. And Adam didn't want to do it as a periodical. He wanted to do it as a book. And so we pulled together some great stuff from Dharma Combat, and Adam had a few things in his files that he hadn't really found a home for. And we put them together as the book Secret and Suppressed, Banned Ideas in Hidden History. And one of the articles in it is an interview with a guy who claimed to have been basically the Inspector General for a mafia-like organization of ex-Nazis that had been run by Otto Scorsese, who was Hitler's favorite commando. He was to the Nazis, he was what our Rambo is. He was viewed as being the greatest soldier alive, and was used by Hitler to as an example of what a great soldier should be, and he was hugely popular, and apparently his death was faked, and he went to Spain and operated what he called the Nazi International, which was theoretically a business venture, but was in fact a mafia-like operation that ensured business went to former Nazis who were Nazis who had escaped to various points all over the world.
Now, do you think, just from your own perspective, that should some shadowy organization have the lance now? Do they need to let it be known that they do, or can they just use it for their own devious pursuits? Because obviously there's a lot of talk of conspiracy theory nowadays, and especially in this post-9/11 world and New World Order talk. Let's say the New World Order's got the lance. Do they have to let us know that they have it, or do you think they could just use it to take over the world? Just your thoughts on it. Obviously, like, it's not going to be written in Time magazine or something.
Yeah, I doubt if the people who have the lance today, if it's not the one in Vienna, if it is hidden somewhere in the world, it's hidden for a reason, and they would only bring it out if it had propaganda value to bring it out.
Yeah, it's not like they have it and they're going about their plans to take over the world. And
well, we examine this question at the end of the book. We try to make some guesses as to where the lance is now, and George came up with a pretty good guess. So that's what went in the book. Is Kurt Waldheim was the former Prime Minister of Austria and former Secretary General of the United Nations, and he was elevated to the position of Secretary General of the United Nations shortly after the lance was rescued from Antarctica. So that may have played a role, and if it went to him, that may be why he was elevated to king of the world there for a minute.
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious that he lives in Vienna, a few blocks from the Royal Palace, where the spear is on display. So the spear may actually live a few blocks from itself.
Exactly. In the introduction, you talk a lot about Jim Keith. I didn't realize, obviously I didn't realize this until I read the introduction, that you knew him since high school. And like you were telling these stories about, you guys were teenagers working on this stuff. What was that like growing up with Jim Keith? Because he's a pretty well-known name in the esoteric community and a very well-known conspiracy writer. Obviously, he passed away, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. But you sound like you were really good friends with the guy. So tell me about Jim Keith so we can keep his memory alive.
Yeah, Jim was my best friend from 1966 to 1999. One day in about the third or fourth day of the school year, I'm in PE class and I hear these two guys talking about Lord of the Rings, and I just finished reading it. And I walked over and butted into their conversation. And it turned out that they were members of a local science fiction club. In fact, founders of the local science fiction club, and invited me to join. This was the Valley Science Fiction Association, the VALSA, and I ended up hanging out with them practically every day of my life throughout my from 16 to 22. We did Jim and I did a number of scenes together. Jim had a rather broad swath. Jim was very tall, very handsome, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan. He was a poet, very emotional fellow, and had women lined up to be his girlfriends. I mean, he had an entourage of women hanging off of him. Of course, I was always very jealous of that.
I'm jealous of it just hearing about it.
Yeah. And every time I got a girlfriend, she ended up with him.
Oh man!
and then got passed on.
Oh jeez. And were you guys, like you say, you guys were interested in sci-fi, and then it sort of just grew into the esoteric research that you guys became well known for, right?
Well, a lot of things going on there. I had Gosh, I'm remembering these strange things. 1966, or 67, I'd known Jim for I don't know, 6 months or so, and Jim had heard about the I Ching, and his library card, he was not very good at taking library books back, and owed a mountain of fines. So he asked me to go to the library and check it out for him.
Yeah.
And we both really got into the I Ching, and the Eastern religions in a variety of ways. We were always, we were heads. We were part of the psychedelic 60s.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of, I was very taken with Zen Buddhism, and the Tao Te Ching and so on. In fact, I actually, in the early 70s, I ran for county commissioner on a Taoist ticket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Jim and I, from high school on, were very much interested in the esoteric. Not so much conspiracy, but alternative religions. One of the zines we were doing, which was, oddly enough, we never did figure out a title for it, so it was simply untitled. It got huge critical acclaim. It was generally reviewed as the best zine of that year, out of L.A.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things we published, one of the articles we published was something. Now, in science fiction fandom has a lot of connections to Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer and a member of the LOSFIS, which we were also members of the LOSFIS. The Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society, the oldest science fiction club in the country. It's met every Thursday night since 1936.
Oh, wow.
Has a clubhouse in North Hollywood right now. And so I knew a lot of people who knew L. Ron Hubbard, and I knew a lot of people who had been in and out of Dianetics and Scientology. Jim and I were doing this untitled zine, and we got an article from an old-time Dianeticist, or before it was Scientology, it was Dianetics.
Yeah.
And this guy gave us an article with the title Nonfiction, and it was recalls from the last 3 billion years of his past lives, and the Dianetic techniques used to help him remember them.
Yeah.
And Jim just flipped over this. Shortly after that, we ended up splitting up. We were in Pomona, California, and his parents moved to Kansas City, and neither of us had jobs. We're both in our early 20s. Neither of us have jobs. We're mooching off our parents. He goes to Kansas City with his parents. Meanwhile, another member of the crew, Jim Schumacher, and his girlfriend decide they're going to get out of L.A. And I end up moving with them to Klamath Falls, Oregon. And I don't see Jim for a couple of years. And then he shows up on my doorstep one day, and again, he's very emotional, and he's crying. He's crying continuously because his love affair just went south on him. And it turns out that he had worked for the Church of Scientology in Kansas City, where he had learned that if you work for the church, you get free training and counseling. So he had signed up for the free stuff and was working for them, and then had gone to Riverside, California, and worked for the church there.
Yeah.
And that's when he fell in love with this girl, and then she broke his heart, and he didn't know what to do, so he came and mooched off me. And this was summer of 75. No, I take that back. He showed up just before Thanksgiving 74.
Okay.
I'm working as a busboy, and I'm sick of working as a busboy. I throw in the towel on that, and I don't have a job. He doesn't have a job. Summer 75, I go down to San Francisco. Now, he's having me read. He's telling me, every day he's telling me how wonderful Scientology is and all the wins and gains he's got and how perfect the tech is and yada, yada.
Yeah.
So I go down to San Francisco, summer of '75, and to attend a science fiction convention, and I'm staying at a friend's house, and he's one of the Valsva crew who had left Pomona and moved to San Francisco, and he's living in Noe Valley, if you know where that is, which is a little off from the Haight, and I'm staying on his couch, and I decide before going back to Klamath Falls to just check out Scientology, see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Somehow I ended up becoming a staff member and worked at the Church of Scientology San Francisco for 3 months, which annoyed my friend because I'm camped out on his couch.
Yeah.
That came to an end, and I went back to Klamath Falls, and by this time I'm a true believer. Jim's a true believer, and I'm in Klamath Falls for a couple of months, and we did another zine together called Skyline Klamath Falls. And one night during a blizzard, snowstorm, we're waiting for our printer to show up. He never shows up. And I said, well, I've had enough of this. And I joined the monastic order of Scientology called the Sea Org. And a couple of days later, I'm in L.A. wearing a mock naval outfit and working in a Scientology facility. Jim stayed in Klamath Falls for a number of years, and then he went down to Reno to visit his parents, and while he's there, his father had a heart attack, gets a triple bypass, and never really quite recovers from it. And Jim finds himself now living in Reno as babysitting his father.
Yeah.
I escaped from Scientology and I'm back at my parents' house, which every day is I got to get out of here. I worked for a couple of years as a travel agent, and then I'm using all my free travel benefits to go up to Reno to go over writing projects with Jim, because we're now really serious about becoming writers.
Yeah.
This is the mid '80s, and we have pissed away a decade on Scientology, and bad love affairs, and finally I decided, I'm wasting my travel benefits. I'll just move there, and I moved to Reno just about 20 years ago. And Jim and I really tried hard to be fiction writers, and we cranked out a great deal of fiction. Some of it sold, most of it didn't. I got into this ghostwriting gig and did a lot of ghostwriting that didn't make much money or get me any press, and that was sort of depressing. And then we did Dharma Combat, and that got us into a very unusual scene. We discovered the Patriot movement, and that there was a number of people out there who realized that there was a coming world government, and it was not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
And so we end up working with those folks, and there's also this whole the New Age is getting weirder by the day.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we're publishing a New Age magazine in which we're going, this stuff is not good.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we were. And then, as I said, Jim's first book was Secret and Suppressed, which grew out of Dharma Combat. His second book also, we had published something in Dharma Combat called the Skeleton Key to the Gemstone File, and this is wild stuff. It's been circulating Samizdat for 20 years or more before we published it. Apparently, the story is there was a guy named Bruce Roberts who was a scientist, and he developed the technology for making artificial rubies, which are necessary for lasers and a number of other things.
Yeah.
And he takes his technology for making artificial rubies to Howard Hughes, and Howard Hughes stole it. This really pissed off Bruce Roberts, so he then starts making artificial rubies and selling them as real ones. And using that to raise money to find stuff about Howard Hughes. and he writes his mom like daily letters of what he finds. So eventually he ends up with like 1,000 letters that are all the stuff he's found. And there's a woman on the California coast who's been looking into the JFK hit and the Nazi connections to it, and doing a little radio show called Conspiracy Corner named Mae Brussel. And Mae Brussel is like the queen of conspiracy. And he shows up with these 1,000 letters that what he's found is that Howard Hughes was kidnapped and murdered by Aristotle Onassis, who was the guy who paid for the JFK hit. The day he shows up at Mae Brussels' place, it just happened that there was a reporter from Playgirl magazine named Stephanie Caruana visiting and interviewing Mae at the time. She offers to read the 1,000 letters and put them in and make a digest of what's in them. So this becomes known as the his letters are the gemstone file. And so her digest of it, her abstract of it, is the skeleton key to the gemstone file. Now, we published this in Dharma Combat, and it turns out there's this guy named Ron Bonds who has been collecting every known copy of it, and he gets in contact with Jim Keith. They bounce some ideas off of each other, and they decide to produce a book. Ron creates a publishing company, which he calls Illuminet, and Jim writes the first book for Illuminet, which is the Gemstone File, which is Jim doesn't really write the book so much as edit it. It's a collection of, it's an anthology of articles written around either supporting or trashing the Gemstone File. And he comes in contact with a lot of the key movers and shakers in the conspiracy movement. Ron Bonds creates holds a convention he lives in the Atlanta area, and he holds a science fiction goth conspiracy convention. And apparently it was what really made Jim's career, going there and meeting in the flesh some of the major shakers in the movement. And out of that came his career. And I to this day I kick myself for not having gone.
I bet. And you stayed close to him up until his untimely death. That must have been quite a shock. It was a surprise. It wasn't really like, it was an accidental, I wouldn't even say accident. It was sort of like a fluke death, right? Yeah,
it was very odd. My co-author on Secrets of the Holy Lands is George Picard, whose previous book was Liquid Conspiracy, and George and Jim went to Burning Man together. Burning Man is the world's greatest art festival. It's held for held for 8 days in the Nevada desert, about 120 miles north of Reno, in a place called the Black Rock Desert. And there were probably about 28,000 people there the year that Jim and George went. And that was George's second time to go and Jim's first. And at Burning Man, it's not like a rock concert. It's not one big stage and everybody sits looking at it. It is a full-on city. It is the 7th largest city in the state, with hundreds of miles of streets and major art installations and major art events taking place continuously. At any given year, there are 100 or 200 stages.
Oh, wow.
Well, they were on a stage that was set up for a band who called themselves the Black Rock Rangers. And at some point in the middle of the night, around 1, 2 in the morning, they realized that they were the only people sitting on the stage, that everybody had gotten off and left them there, and they'd been so busy talking to each other they hadn't noticed it. So they decided, well, let's go somewhere where there's some action. And George jumped down and took a couple of steps and then turned to say something to Jim and realized that Jim wasn't there. And he looked back, and Jim is in a pile at the foot of the stage. And it had only been about 3 or 4 feet high. And Jim was a very large guy. He was like 6'4", 6'6".
Oh wow.
He wasn't fat, but he was overweight. I would guess he was pushing 300 pounds, probably 280, 290, something like that.
So he was stocky.
Yeah, he was. His calves were bigger than my head.
Oh, wow.
And he went down hard. I mean, they'd been drinking all day for a couple of days, and he didn't know his own strength. Went down, and they couldn't tell what had happened exactly. And they went to the medical tent, and the guys at the med tent couldn't tell whether it was broken or sprained. And Jim is just, it's nothing. I'll get over it.
Mm-hmm. And
so George takes Jim home. And so it's a 3-4 hour drive back, and they get in about sunrise, and it took Jim 45 minutes to crawl from the car to his living room.
Oh, Jesus.
Now this is, I think, Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Jim was the sort of person who simply refused to fix anything.
Yeah.
When he died, he lived in a mobile home. Neither of the doors actually closed. A third of the windows were broken out. The shelves in the kitchen didn't hold anything because they'd all collapsed. Jim simply refused to fix anything. If it broke, he just left it. So he broke himself, and he refused to fix it. He had 2 daughters. I believe they were 11 and 13 at the time, and he ordered them not to call the hospital, not to call the ambulance, that he'll get over it. Well, the girls didn't know what to do, so they called Jim's sister, Aunt Kathy.
Yeah.
And so Aunt Kathy drives down from Portland.
Oh,
she gets there about Tuesday. Takes one look at him and says, "You're going to the hospital, buddy," because he hadn't moved off the floor for 2 days.
Yeah.
So they get him into an ambulance, and he gets to the hospital either Tuesday or Wednesday, I forget which. He gets there, and it must have been Wednesday. He gets to the hospital. He gets there, and of course, having not moved, with a broken leg, his blood chemistry is shot, and they got to stabilize him. So they keep him overnight. And the last non-medical person to see him alive saw him about 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon. And she said that when she came into his room, there were 2 massage therapists giving him physical therapy.
Yeah.
Now, he goes into the OR, and apparently he makes it out of the OR, goes into ICU, and dies from a blood clot to the lung.
Yeah.
Now, that physical therapy ensured that if there were any blood clots, they would get loose and go somewhere nasty. So I put his death down to, at the least, medical malpractice.
Yeah, yeah. So you think, you're not like a big subscriber to he was murdered type of thing. You think it was just probably by just a lousy medical work?
Yeah, that hospital is infamous for lousy medical work.
Oh, really?
Here's a good example of this is Jason May. You may know Jason May. He acquired the RFK archive from the LAPD. When Robert Kennedy was shot at the Ambassador Hotel, the LAPD collected this immense amount of evidence, there was 10,000 documents in the LAPD file, and Jason May got it. So Jason May is a friend of Jim's and a friend of Jim's lawyer. Jim's lawyer for a short while was also Sirhan's lawyer.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty clear that Sirhan was a mind control victim, and that he was not the shooter. In fact, he apparently had a starter's gun firing blanks, and was clearly in a hypnotic state. He was clearly not in possession of his own mind during the event.
Yeah.
So Jason May, 2 weeks after Jim dies in Washoe Medical Center, checks into Washoe Medical Center to get some elective surgery. And he's lying there in the bed, and the orderlies come in and they start prepping him for the surgery, but they're prepping the wrong side of his body.
Oh.
He demands to know what's going on. Well, he just happens to look at the wrist tag. You know, when you go to the hospital, they put a tag around your wrist and you identify who you are.
Yeah.
He looks at it and it says he's Edna May.
Oh.
They're prepping him for some woman's surgery. At that point, he realized, you know, Jim just died here a couple weeks ago. They're going to do the same thing to me. He got up, put his clothes on, and walked out of the hospital.
So it's a pretty lousy hospital.
Yeah, I've gone there a few times, but never willingly.
There you go. All right. And obviously it was a big loss to lose Jim Keith in the esoteric community because he was a very good researcher and author and everything. So, you know, I'm really sorry to hear about that. And I didn't get into the field really until after he had passed. So it's too bad for me because I never got a chance really to find out more about him and meet him as I'm meeting so many other people now in the field.
You know, one of the great losses is that he insisted that he had figured out the secret to Baphomet. You know, the Templar code word that everybody's been trying to figure out what the heck it means for the last 1,200 years.
Yeah.
He was convinced that he had figured it out. And he wouldn't tell anybody because he was going to write a book on it.
Oh, man. And he took that to the grave with him.
Yeah.
Huh. He never gave you any clues?
Mm-mm. Every time I asked him about it, he'd say things like, that would be telling.
Now, did you and him grow up in L.A.? Because you said you guys ended up there. Did you guys grow up in L.A., or where did you guys go to high school?
Well, it was Pomona.
Okay.
Pomona is about 40 miles due east of downtown Los Angeles.
Nice.
I believe he was born in Kansas City. I was born in Pomona. Shortly after birth, I was moved out of town. My parents, I'm adopted. And the papers were signed on me 3 days before I was born. And as soon as I was ready to leave the hospital, my parents took me to where they lived, which was in Paris, California, P-E-R-R-I-S.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived in Paris for the first 5 years, and then sort of drifted around in Southern California, and oddly enough, ended up back in Pomona for high school.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and that's where you met Jim Keith.
That's where I met Jim Keith, who he had grown. Most of his grade school years were spent in the Silver Lake district in downtown L.A.
Oh, okay.
And then for junior high, he moved out to Pomona, where he met Jim Schumacher and Russell Bryan Brooker, and we're all still friends. I talk to both of those guys at least once a month, and we have a little online club and two discussion groups, because the one part of the club is feuding with the other, which is how it's always been. I mean, the Valsa always was one part of the club feuding with the other, and the feud never went away, but just who was feuding with who changed.
That sounds like much of the esoteric community in general, always feuding.
Yeah.
Well, what's next for you now that the Lance book has been out? What can we expect from you in the future?
Well, I'm working on chemtrails, HARP, and weather warfare, the military's plan to draft Mother Nature.
Yeah.
And while I'm working on it, I have a pretty sweet deal from my publisher. My publisher owns most of the town of Kempton, Illinois. He, as well as his house, he owns several other houses, and two houses are open as guest houses. One is the World Explorers Club clubhouse, and the other is the Knights Armory Bed and Breakfast. And I'm staying in the Knights Armory Bed and Breakfast. So I'm living rent free while I'm writing the book, but I'm working at the bookstore. The Adventures Unlimited Press has a bookstore and fulfillment center and warehouse here in town. Also has a bar and grill. So I spend 6 or 8 hours a day answering phones and picking orders, and then I spend a couple hours a day writing the book.
Oh, that's nice. That's a good deal. Now, when do you expect that book will be rolling out? Sometime later this year, next year, you think?
We are holding a conference here on May 6th, and my plan is to hand the final manuscript to the publisher on May 5th. So I'm going to give him the manuscript, and then I'm going to speak at the conference, and then I'm going to pack my bags.
Nice. What information do you have about that conference? Because I haven't heard anything about it. That might be something worth checking out.
Well, it's May 6th. Actually, that's when the talking is going to be. It's going to be a 3-day gala, May 5, 6, and 7. Friday the 5th, we're going to have wine and cheese reception and all night drinking, and then Saturday we'll have a number of speakers. They will include David Hector Childress speaking on Mu, Atlantis, and power systems of the gods. Christopher Dunn, who wrote the Giza Power Plant, where he has made the great breakthrough in Egyptology. He has conclusively proven that the Great Pyramid is not a burial mound, but was in fact a machine. And so his topic is going to be evidence of ancient machining. A number of other speakers are going to be like William Henry speaking on Cloak of the Illuminati, and myself speaking on Secrets of the Holy Lands. All in all, I think there's 7 speakers. Awesome. And it'll go late into the evening, and we'll have a banquet. And then Sunday is sort of your basic dead dog party of people hanging out and getting autographs and recovering from their hangovers.
Yeah, networking and that kind of thing. Yeah, awesome.
And again, that's in Kempton, Illinois. Kempton is about a 2-hour drive south of Chicago's O'Hare Airport, about halfway between Chicago and Champaign, and it's just about dead center between I-55 and I-57.
Okay, now, is there a web address for that, or could they do a Google search for the name of the conference, or what's the best way to find information? Well, through your website, you think?
Yeah, it's on the World Explorers Club website, which is www.wexclub.com.
Okay, and let's give out your websites here. It's jerryesmith.com, and that's JERRYESmith.com, SMITH. And for information about the book, it's spearbook.com, correct?
That is correct. Spearbook is it's got some technical name, but it's not really a website, but it'll bounce you over to the website, because the real name for the website is secretsoftheholylands.com, and that's just the front page. And then to go to the main page, it's secretsoftheholylands.com / squiggle things and weird equals page 1 nonsense. Nobody can remember that. I can't remember that. So just spearbook.com. You don't even need the darn W's, just spearbook.com, and it'll take you there.
Awesome, and that's SPEARBOOK.com. And if you want to just pick up the book, if you want to just call the number is 1-800-718-4514, and that's the Adventures Unlimited press order line. Right?
Righto. 1-800-718-4514. Call during normal business hours, and Beth and Mary will be happy to take your order.
Yes, and tell them you heard the interview on Binnall of America Audio.
Now, to get an autograph copy, go to Spearbook. At spearbook.com, you can get a copy autographed by both the authors. To get if you call Beth or Mary at Adventures Unlimited Press at 1-800-718-4514, if you tell them you want an autograph copy, I will autograph one to you. But it won't have George's autograph. You got to go to spearbook.com to get George's autograph. Okay. Or you can just go to Amazon.com, or you can go to BarnesandNoble.com, or you can go to your local Barnes & Noble. It's in all major bookstores.
Awesome.
And you can get it at Amazon.com for a discount, but no autographs.
Okay. And once again, we'll give the number out again one time, 800-1-800-718-4514, and call during business hours. Don't call at 2 in the morning.
Well, you can, but you'll get an answering machine. And I know most people are a little queasy about leaving their credit card numbers on an answering machine.
Yeah, exactly. So call during business lines. You can get the so you can order the book. Check out the book. I really enjoyed it. It's awesome. It covers the Holy Lance all through history, where it's turned up, who's claimed to have it, who's had it, and all the various adventures they've had with the Lance, and then also really in-depth Hitler and his role with the Lance, and what may have happened to the Lance after that. A lot of great stuff on the Antarctic, rumors of Nazi bases there, and a lot of awesome stuff about Hitler and potential scenarios post-World War II with Hitler. Just covers tons of stuff. I really enjoyed the book. Thank you very much, Jerry, for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
That does it for this week's edition of Binnall of America Audio. I want to thank Jerry E. Smith for sitting down and talking to us for so long. Really appreciate it. Gave us tons of information. I want to thank Leslie, Chiron, and R. Lee of BinnallofAmerica.com for your help and support with the audio series. And, of course, I want to thank all you great listeners out there who have discovered Binnall of America Audio, who have been checking out the interviews. I hope you enjoy what you hear, and I hope you come back for more. Check out BinnallofAmerica.com for more esoteric ramblings of the finest sort. We've got columns from Leslie, Chiron, and R. Lee, weekly columns from me, feature articles. If you're a long-time listener of Binnall of America Audio and you want to help out, we have a PayPal button at BinnallofAmerica.com. Click the PayPal button, throw some change in the bucket, give us a donation. It'll help offset the costs of the audio series. Next week, the guest to be announced. I have somebody lined up for the end of the week, but it's not 100%. We don't have it taped yet, so I don't want to announce anybody for sure. But it looks like we should have a show. If not, we will take the week off, but check back at BinnallofAmerica.com on Friday or Saturday to find out more, and you'll know then if we will have a guest or not, or if we'll have a show or not. We should have a more definitive schedule coming out soon for the rest of the season. We expect to wrap up Binnall of America Audio Season 1 towards the end of May. So we've got about 2.5 months left of esoteric audio at its finest. Then we'll be taking some time off to roll out Season 2. But that's a long way off. For now, I'm Tim Binnall, signing off.